What's up, everybody? Hope y'all can hear me good. Yeah, welcome everyone. Welcome. Let us some folks come in real quick. See who all is in here. Um, I'm Dr. Bruce Strobel. I'm excited to share this space with you all. Tonight, we're going to dive into some important, timely discussions inspired by my new book, By Any Dreams Necessary: Anti-Racist Strategies for Sustainability, Resilience, and Environmental Justice in African American Communities. It's a lot going on, so I'm excited to have these discussions. Please feel free to hit the comments if you feel it's something you want to discuss, it's something you want me to touch on. And we're just going to dive right in, man. Giving a few more folks who told me they was going to be here a few seconds to get here. Yeah. What's up, Ken? Okay. Everybody's here. Let's go. All right. So, again, tonight's discussions, current events mostly, but we'll be talking about a lot of the themes that I highlight in my new work, By Any Dreams Necessary. I think right now the big thing that everyone wants to talk about is this whole idea of American democracy and what's happening. Is it feasible? Should we even pursue it any longer? Should we just accept the full retreat from democracy that we're seeing? I know normally when I bring up this concept, a lot of people will automatically say America's never been a democracy. I couldn't agree with you more. But I may be coming from a different perspective. I've always argued, as I learned in my research and my studies, that democracy is an aspirational state that it would take a lot of evolution amongst humans to actually reach at a massive scale. We might be able to do democracy in small organizations or whatever, but to get there, to have an actual democratic nation, I think that's aspirational, right? But right now we see the so-called path to democracy being impeded right here in the United States. Serious threats, authoritarianism is on the rise, which is an actual retreat from democracy. I said in the video recently that I think what happens is we're in the United States and in the Western world, and I think for most of the world is experiencing this. We're caught in this epic battle between democracy and white supremacy. And whenever people of color, whenever Black people, we start trying to push the country towards democracy, the white backlash always pulls us back in the other direction. So we take two steps forward towards making this country more democratic. We get people out there marching, people out there sacrificing their lives. And then the white backlash and their allies, because they're not always all white, but whoever's with them trying to move us back towards white supremacy because they see that loss of privilege as them being oppressed, or they just have a lot of fear around that. And you could look no further than any of my social media pages and see how these people be going crazy just because I say that we need to be anti-racist and that Black communities need to build themselves up and not be dependent on anybody to do it. And you would think that conservatives who talk that shit, like that they would support those narratives, but they be coming from you hard, y'all. It'd be crazy. So again, people are scared of this whole idea of anti-racism, of democracy. It sounds good. It's a notion that people like to say, but it's not something people really willing to put in the work for. So when we look at leaders like Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump and whatever state you in, probably you see people who are either half stepping towards democracy or people who are fully retreating from it because they don't want nothing to do with it. And it looks like gerrymandering. It looks like outright stealing elections, voting rights restrictions, limiting what could be taught in schools, subverting AP African-American studies classes, trying to stop professors from teaching critical race theory, anything, the whole outlawing of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's all an effort to stop democracy from happening. So this isn't just politics as usual. It's a direct attack on the power of the people. And it specifically targets the people who they're most afraid of, and that's the Black and brown people in this country. So political scientists would call this a clear case of executive aggrandizement, where a legitimately elected leader begins consolidating power, bypassing state control, and starting to eliminate or squelch all dissent. And that's just textbook democratic erosion. So let's see what they're saying in the comments real quick, y'all. No comments yet. Okay, okay. I want to hear what y'all think about that. I definitely want to hear what y'all think about that. Are we seeing full scale democratic erosion? Am I over exaggerating it? Is this a fascist takeover? Because I think if the current administration is just bad and we could wait them out, that's it's a different strategy for that. We could just gear up and prepare some election campaigns. But if this is what it looks like, if this is a fascist takeover and complete erosion of this approach at democracy and removing all the democratic avenues that have been built into this country, I think the strategy has to be very different. So just this weekend in Los Angeles, 2,000 National Guard troops rolled in when folks came out against those brutal immigration raids that are taking place. Tear gas, mass arrests, the whole militarized scene. Governor Newsom is calling it unconstitutional. And again, this is anti-democracy. This is what it looks like, right? That's authoritarian overreach. So it's something I talk about quite frequently in my book. I argue that racism and true democracy cannot coexist because democracy has to be built on inclusion, equality, fair representation, and undeniable human rights. So that means that when, say a country decides that it wants to do, through a democratic process, decides that it wants to do deportation of illegal immigrants, and I don't like that term, but undocumented people, we should say, right? We wanted to deport them, and we agreed to do that. How would you determine who's an illegal immigrant, who's here? You would have to have a process, and then you would have to establish due process for it to work and do it in a democratic fashion. And then that would require that people have been given a process to become legal citizens in the first place. And then if they violate something, there has to be some kind of hearing. They have to have some kind of basic human rights to due process. In the absence of that, you're veering directly towards some kind of extremist situation. And these things have happened throughout time. This is not new, and it always ends up, in a kind of Hitlerish kind of approach. So I think it's important that we pay attention to that frequently as this situation develops. So yeah, By Any Dreams Necessary doesn't just highlight challenges. I really try to focus on providing strategies and solutions and clear action for fighting back effectively. A lot of it is capitalism derails democracy. That's an interesting one, right? I agree with you, Baba Bill, but I've heard the arguments from the capitalists that the two can coexist. I don't think it can, because when you have extremes of wealth, and you have to have economic democracy, and economic democracy itself is anti-capitalism, because what it would allow, or what capitalism allows, is for people to buy elections, like we just saw Elon Musk do, and he's regretting it now, right? But he simply was paying people to come out and vote. And when you have that significant imbalance, those extremes of wealth, it leaves people vulnerable to continuous political exploitation. And you know who said that first? I think it might have been George Washington and then Thomas Jefferson. They saw that if you had a class of people who were undergirded, they would be subject to continuous political exploitation. And that was not something they wanted for the country. But yeah, capitalism is a critical factor in stopping this country from realizing democracy, or stopping people across the world from realizing democracy. And something that you have to think about, because whenever people have this discussion about capitalism versus other economic and governing systems, what they'll argue is like, look at the productivity that comes out of capitalism and then they'll compare it to communists here or communists there. But I think what you have to look at is how are capitalist societies built? What does it take to get there, right? And you can't do it. You can't just skip all those steps. Like, you got to do the slavery, you got to do the mass genocides of the indigenous people. You got to pollute water, air. You got to build railroad tracks through forests. You got to cut down all your trees and destroy the ecosystems, all the animals that go extinct. That whole picture is capitalism. but people like to focus on the end and just be like, oh, look at these extremes of wealth and how much better people are doing, without lifting up that veil or lifting up that guild, they say, so you can see that person under it. You see the leper under there. It's like, whoa, like this is an ugly picture. So yes, genocide, theft, slavery, war, that's the recipe for capitalism. But when the chef brings the final dish out, they try to just show you the money and the gold and the jewelry, right? But they don't show you everything that it took to get them there. So I'm definitely agreeing with you there, Barbara. Um, you can't get to a democratic state or democratic governance with capitalism in the way. What y'all think? Healthcare. Okay, so I think, how do you do healthcare, true healthcare, communal healthcare in a capitalist system? Um, it's an interesting challenge, right? I think we look at the insurance companies, we look at medical facilities, and when they're built to profit, it's no way you could be built to profit and value human lives equally. You're going to value the people who have the most money, and then people are going to be kind of swept aside and be allowed to fall through your system. So changing the healthcare system ultimately means changing our idea about capitalism again. All right. And capitalism and racism, they go hand in hand. They're brothers and sisters in the white supremacist ethos. So yeah, I'm with you on that. But how do we get to better healthcare? We need complete systems change. We have to really, it has to be community based at times, and you have to get away from these for-profit models and how we treat people. It has to be grounded in the population knowing how to stay healthy and heal themselves. Absolutely. And I agree with that. And then I still think that you need organized facilities with specialists trained at treating ailments. We need epidemiologists in place to prevent epidemics, but it requires a degree of social capital where we have to get back to where people can trust each other, and we don't have just a bunch of wackos on social media telling us that the COVID-19 is being caused by 5G or whatever people be saying. Like, people get on here and say anything, and it's all kind of misconceptions, and nobody trusts each other anymore. So it allows people to get away with just saying whatever they want. And a lot of people get misled. That leaves a lot of people vulnerable. But it all steers back to everyone's trying to profit and capitalize or exploit someone else. And as long as we're living like that, I think we're always going to be held back. So in my book, I talk a lot about communal strategies that people in African American communities have used over time to take care of themselves. And one of it is definitely people producing their own food, people producing their own herbs and medicines, people working together and sharing wealth in a way that is not so individualized. So yeah, I hear you. So when communities are strong, they could resist these pressures. They're better able to survive. But I was talking with my brother the other day, and he was saying that although collectivism and collective work is useful, it doesn't, it's just a survival tactic as long as the capitalist system is allowed to thrive unchecked. And I had to resonate on that for a while. Ultimately, if we're looking to have something sustainable, we're looking to have long-term progress in our communities, I don't think we could get away from it without having these discussions about how we distribute wealth and how we distribute power in our society. And I don't necessarily consider myself a socialist either, right? I think that eventually we have to start looking at concepts that fit the moment and meet people's needs. And I'm not anti-socialist in any way. I think socialism has some great concepts. And don't get mad at me, I think there's times where free market approaches could be useful. I just don't think it could be unchecked, and that it could be so unfair where you could have, I don't think you could have a free market if you have one person come in and they control all the resources. So yeah, I have varying ideas about that. I really want to talk about over time with y'all, but I do want to get back to this California protest because I kind of started on it and I veered away because there's a lot of good conversations going on in these comments. All right. So, folks is hitting the streets. People are fed up because of the deportation policies that look to me like state violence. I don't see any justice being served here. Nah, I'm not looting nothing, bro. Not today. Um, but let's be real. This isn't really about, it's not just about immigration. It's about power, whose bodies are being policed, whose voices are getting silenced, and who gets labeled illegal. Now, for African Americans, for Black people in this country, there was a time when we were illegal contraband in the United States. So now to see that label passed off to someone else is very threatening, because I think, when people could be deemed as illegal or subhuman or just because of who they are, it allows for all types of oppressive factors and mistreatment to take place. So I'm glad to see people pushing back against that. And this is one of the main reasons why I wrote my book, because we need strategies to fight back. I tried to kind of calculate how people have survived, what people did to resist, different approaches that people use. But this is something that needs to be an ongoing discussion, because there may be a time where people should be out there throwing and doing whatever they need to do, resisting however they need to. But there also has to be follow up. I think one of the things we learned from the whole Occupy Wall Street movement, they were really great at drawing people out and capitalizing off of the the angst that a lot of people were feeling. But I remember going out there a couple times, and I never saw anything that was able to be turned into a permanent movement for change. It was kind of just like people were upset and they all went outside and protested together. And yeah, that seemed to be a significant challenge for a lot of these movements. How do you turn them into long-term action? The name of the book is By Any Dreams Necessary: Anti-Racist Strategies for Sustainability, Resilience, and Environmental Justice. Please check it out. You could go to my TikTok shop. You could go to my website, StroubleJr.com, wherever you want to purchase it from. But it's on every major platform. All right. So I think about the bus boycotts to the Soweto uprisings, the Zapatistas, all the way back to Ferguson, and we know disruption is a very effective approach and works well when it's coordinated. But people will burn out. It's only so much you could do. Bail funds can only be put up so much. People got children to feed, they got parents to take care of, and it's not so simple that you could just stay out there protesting forever. So there has to be follow up. There has to be organization. There has to be a political wing to it. It has to be economic movements built around this. But I'm glad to see, I'm glad to see the energy. I just want to see it materialize into something that is productive and leads to permanent change. And I don't want to put that onus on people right now. Take your time, disrupt, but just know that eventually that next step has to come. Right. So, just so everybody know, I'm with all my people because I'm from Altadena. So that's LA County. So I'm with all my people out there. So I just have to throw my hat on just real quick so people know where I'm from and what side I'm on when it comes to these struggles. And I support my Latinx brothers and sisters out there fighting all the people out there, white, black, all the allies my Palestinian people, anybody who is against this oppression and this violation of people's human rights. I support you. All right. So if you're watching me right now and wondering how this connects to you, understand that this authoritarianism is spreading. Florida, Texas, California, Trump, DeSantis, two heads on the same beast: anti-black, anti-democratic, because it's Democratic members of the Democratic Party that are supporting this. And we're going to get to them because they be hiding behind the Republicans and saying, oh, what can we do? Like, all we could do is a filibuster and we could just talk, and they're not taking decisive action. But hold on, I'm going to get back to that. I'm sorry, I digress. That be pissing me off sometimes, all right? But we're not powerless, y'all. We got history, we have intellect, we have heart. And my book, again, by any dreams necessary is not just a title, it's a blueprint for any of us who believe that, we could have a better future. But it starts with us being able to dream. And I don't just mean dreams in the esoteric way. I just mean being able to think freely and explore your thoughts. And that's often what I believe, that when you're dreaming, you're exploring all the different possibilities. And I think that's what we have to do sometimes. I think a lot of times we get caught up on like, this isn't going to work because of this, or this isn't going to work because of that. And, the fear that there's going to be backlash and reprisal. But I think once people impede your ability to dream, I think you already losing. Fannie Lou Hamer said nobody's free until everybody's free. And I want y'all to let that sink in, because I think one of the big psyops I saw happening early after the election was a lot of people saying, we're going to sit this out. We're not going to do anything about it. Just let fascism take its course. And I heard it and I understood the sentiment, but I was like, yo, like that's really dangerous, right? Like, because again, as I was saying at the beginning of the video, you let fascism run its course, it might not be no way to get back from it. So I definitely think the scenario that we're in requires pushback. It requires people to protect their voices, protect their rights, and to be vigilant. So I see Black-led movements stepping up and the state responding with force. I see Latino brothers and sisters stepping up, state responding with force. So I think it's important to be careful, be strategic, be smart, be creative, but it's not the time to be silent. Not at all. So, you got me. So I thought it said Joe Biden just joined the live. I was about to put Joe on stage. Like, hey, what you doing in here, bro? You got some splaining to do. So I see my sis, Melanie Williams, took issue with people saying, let's put that on the screen because this is important. I took issue with people saying we're going to sit this out. Why? We stand to lose the most. They attack Black people from every angle all the time. We're not immigrants. Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, and that was being pushed on Black people. And then when I would question people and I say, so, if they start deporting Black immigrants, right? Are we going to say something then? Because we got our Haitian brothers and sisters here. We got people from the Caribbean, Trinidad, all that's Black people to me. So, and normally under questioning, people will say, well, no, we'll respond to that. But it seemed to be this angst against this perceived idea that Latinos went out and voted for Trump. And, I saw the numbers, and I believe there were a considerable amount of people of Latin descent who voted for Donald Trump. But I also think that some of those election numbers is kind of funny. I can't prove anything yet, and I don't like to do conspiracy theories, but something don't seem right when I be looking at those exit poll results. All right, and we'll talk about that later as I have more evidence. I've seen a lot of people talking about it on social media space, and I don't want to jump on that train yet. But I'm sorry, I keep getting sidetracked. Back to what I was saying. People seem willing to sacrifice Latinos' human rights because they were upset about how the election turned out. And again, I understand that sentiment of, people have to fuck around and find out. But hold up here. I think Melanie made a good point. What happens what have we learned about oppression? It doesn't just stay focused on one group. That's normally the proxy to advance white supremacy. And then it'll be our turn again in no time. So what Malcolm always said, what freedom fighters of the past always said, what the Panthers always said, is that we have to fight oppression wherever it is. And again, if we're looking at fascism, I mean, we have to consider making some uneasy alliances in the interest of protecting Black people. So when you say you're for something by any means necessary, that might mean working with people who are not perfect allies so that we could get a stop to what's going on right now. And these discussions we're going to have, y'all, because, man, Do y'all understand where these people will have us if we don't resist and if we're not successful? Do y'all know what this looks like for our grandchildren? With all this new technology coming on board, these disruptions in the economy, who do you think is going to bear the brunt of that? What has history taught us? All right. We know mass incarceration hasn't stopped. It hasn't slowed down. Yeah. Let me see what my sister said, right? She said, we got to come together. People should rest and take breaks as they need to, but acting like we're going to stop doing politics is wild to me. Nah, I'll never sit idly by while people are doing the work of Satan himself. Yes, I'm with you, sis. I'm with you 100%. Okay, what else y'all got? What else y'all thinking? Any questions before we close this one out? Let me see my boy William. Okay. Black people have to identify our own end game before we take the fights of other groups. We haven't clearly defined what we want. This is a good point. All right. So, do we have to wait till we have a goal to defend human rights? I personally think that it's in defense of Black people to defend the human rights and defend this idea of democratic process because we rely on it. So if we allow the precedent to be set that you could violate people's human rights because you said this law says that, it just makes it that much harder for us to defend against those same attacks when the focus is turned on us. And this has happened before and it could happen again. We've seen how in critical race theory, we call this differential racialization, right? What happens is that in the interest of white supremacy, different racial groups get different treatments at different times. So you could go just like that from being the favored model minority to being the outcast. And we've seen that happen with Chinese people just in short periods of time, right? Like one day, they're like, all you other minorities should be like the Chinese. They're so productive. The next day, Trump is making jokes about Chinese people spreading diseases in the country, right? And that's why I think defending human rights in general should be a baseline of what we stand for. Because if you allow any group's human rights to be violated because of their race or ethnicity, it only empowers white supremacy to take those same actions against you. So again, what I started off with is that we're in this perpetual struggle in the United States between democracy and white supremacy. And Black people have been at the front lines of that fight for centuries now, right? So then what happens is that fatigue, and I see people talking about Black fatigue, like they're tired of always being on our shoulders. But we, again, stand the most to lose here. There's a lot at stake. And I haven't even got a chance to really talk about the environment and climate change and where this is going. But what I saw happen in the Congo, what's happening in Sudan, what's happening to the people in Gaza, like, I don't think, the way I see the world, those things are not so far-fetched from becoming a reality for people around the world unless we stand up to it now before it spreads to us. And then also, I just feel that sometimes right is right. Like, people should have basic human rights to life and to clean air and clean water. And I don't feel that needs to be racialized, that I have to say I can only defend clean air for Black people. I think all humans benefit from that. With that said, bro, I am pro-Black and I do value Black lives, but I don't value Black lives with the need to subvert or oppress other people. Like, I don't see that as necessary to uphold Black people. So I hear you. And I sense that tension in the community, that people are saying we need to put our own interests first. But I think, again, if this is a fascist system that we're seeing seeded up or we're seeing sprout, like, I don't know if we could afford to just be isolated, like, only we're going to just be like Black people alone trying to face a fully developed fascist system down the line. Like, I think that if there's a potential for alliances and I know I'm gonna get a lot of backlash from this because a lot of my brothers, a lot of my close friends, they don't believe in this. They are strict racial cultural isolationists. They want black people to stay isolated, and I just don't think we can fight like that. I don't think it's gonna be successful, and I think Fred Hampton talked about it, and he got a lot of criticism. And I think even if you look at Malcolm towards the end, if people are really serious about change and progress, then I think we need to make those alliances. If they not, then we need to move along. But what you'll find is there are black people among us, bro, who are also not about progress for our people. So I'm more so aligned with anybody who's trying to have progress in a system that works for all of us, because I don't think like we're gonna get to a situation where like race disappears, or it might get diluted, but I think race is gonna be a factor in American life for the next several decades. So I don't think we could just get over it. I'm coming back to that. I did about these turbines in the Panhandle. I wanted to see if I got any more questions. Okay. Hey, believe what y'all believe. I'm not here to preach nobody religion. You know what I mean? If that's what you believe, that's on you. I'm not knocking it, bro. All right. Looking for comments. Okay, what we got? We don't need to be isolated, but we need to see our issue as it is. Our issue is global, not national. Let me digest that for a minute. We don't need to be isolated. I agree. We need to see our issues as they are. I agree. Our issue is global, not national. I agree. I agree with all that. I just have to take it in. I don't disagree with you, bro. With that said, I still support human rights for all human beings. White, black, Latino, everyone deserves human rights. And I wouldn't support black people violating people's human rights no more than I would support white people. I think people need human rights, bro. All right. So I just want, I'm glad y'all all joined me tonight, because I think these discussions are really important. We got to talk about this stuff. I wrote my book in the hopes that it would spark a lot of these discussions. I always tell people, like, I don't have all the answers. Like, I read a lot. I watch a lot of documentaries. I study Black history. I studied world history, politics for the past, about to age myself, for like the past 20 years. But a lot of times I look at this stuff and I'm just like, what are we going to do? So when I wrote my book, it was just like, what has everyone else said about this problem? What did they do about it? And then from that, I use kind of like a decision-making process to kind of say, okay, because of this problem, I did a SWOT analysis. These are the strengths in the community. These are the weaknesses. These are our opportunities for change. These are the threats we're facing. How do we use these strengths to mitigate these weaknesses? How do we use these opportunities to get us out of the path of these threats? And that was the approach in which I wrote the book. So it's not just talk, it's a strategy for freedom. I think Dr. King said, every man of humane convictions must decide on the protest that suits his convictions, but we all must protest. So, man, more questions. What y'all got? What y'all want to know? What y'all want me to talk about before we get out of here? All right. Well, we had a good little turnout for the first night, everybody. Thank y'all for coming out, man. Thank y'all for listening in. I urge you to get a copy of By Any Dreams Necessary if you haven't read it yet. It's available through all major book outlets, and it's on my website. You can get it in my TikTok shop. You can get it on BruceStroubleJr.com. In the meantime, let's continue to strategize, build, and protect our communities together. The future of our people, the future of humanity depends on it. I'll be here on Monday nights to lead these discussions. I'll be bringing in more people to talk about some of the stuff. I'll be bringing in some of my friends and some of the experts who I know just to have some of these discussions with me. I hope y'all tune in because we got a fight on our hands, and we need solutions, not just people rallying problems or spitting out nonsense. So that's something I'm good at, is solving problems. So I think if we put our minds together, we can solve problems together. So that's it for tonight, everybody. We're going to end this, and I'll see y'all next Monday. Peace.